Double P podcast. Double P.
What I like to call
Double P.
What I like to call
Double P podcast.
Welcome to the Double P Podcast Network. I'm Bubba, the god of specificity. You can find me on Twitter at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIM at specifically FITTENTRIM at Fit and Trim on Twitter. And joining me is the god, an old god, if you will, a god of inattention, a god of no retention. It is the god of... What are you...
It's the god of confusion.
The god of confusion, Catfish. Catfish, how are you doing?
I am doing great today. I tried to make complete notes so that I wouldn't endure your wrath today. You know, you're really, as your podcast partner on several different podcasts,
yeah.
I would identify you more closely to the god of wrath. You're very wrathful when it comes to me. But I am Catfish, and you can hit me up at CJGman67 on Twitter. And oh my God, here we are once again. Talking about American Gods. This is episode 2
of season 1, entitled The Secret of Spoons.
Are they talking about the secret spooning that Bilquis does with all the people that she's got in her space vagina?
She has spooned them up her, and they have disappeared. So this is episode...
It's a secret. Do they ever meet? I want to know if they meet in there.
Man. That is the 2001 of vaginas.
It really is. Oh, man.
So Catfish,
those people floating in space with a smile on their face.
Catfish, it's
yes.
time.
It is time.
We just watched episode 2 of season 1, The Secret of Spoons, and we've got to hear your ranking out of 10. Begins very strong this episode. How do you feel about the cliffhanger we're left on? Let's hear it. What's your rank?
I'm going to give it what I like to call 8 double C's.
Double C's?
Yes, that is checkers something.
Okay.
So
will
something
we find
that
out in this podcast?
Well, that's the secret of checkers.
Okay.
It's the checkers clowning that Czernobog gave him. The checkers, he clowned him in checkers. So 8 checker clownings out of 10. And we should probably say, just again at the top, that I love Neil Gaiman. I've read the book, so I have a lot of knowledge about this, as incomplete as that is and knocking around my head. And so basically, this show is kind of filling in a world that I know. And so I think that my enjoyment of the show, based on if a lot of episodes are like tonight's, is going to be much different than yours. So for you, Bubba, as someone who hasn't read the books, who doesn't know anything except for the name of the show is American Gods,
that's it.
and that there's some people in the show that you recognize, what did you give this?
Well, we're going to have to do a bit of math. I would give that opening scene 10, what I like to call triple S's out of 10.
Triple S's?
Well, triple S, I don't break it out too often nowadays, but sometimes, when you want to refer to smoking slave ships, you got to go to the triple S.
Oh.
And that opening scene, that was a 10. I also want to give a 10 to 10 triple L's out of 10.
Uh-huh. Is that with Lucy again?
Oh, you remember the scene. Yes, I call it...
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I call it Love Lucy Look-a-loos. So when Lucy's giving you a look-a-loo through the TV, I love that.
Oh,
and
okay.
so that scene, I loved it. But, so that's 2 10s for 2 parts of the show.
Got it.
But then the ending of the show, there was a part where you were talking about the long scenes the show had in its premiere last week. There was something about the checkers scene that to me felt like it went on too long. And I'm going to go down for the very end of the show, 6, what I like to call...
Oh, boy.
Triple C's.
Triple C's, uh-huh.
Well, triple C, as you know, is something that when you refer to crappy checkers cliffhangers. And so,
right.
And so the end of the show left me down. But those 2 scenes and a lot of the stuff right at the front, I was just thinking to myself, this show is so fun, even if I just have to turn off my brain and go for the ride. It is a fun ride to be on.
Right,
I love it. So the ending got me down. So I guess that averages out still to be about an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Really liked it.
Well, I think that you ended up liking it just as much as I did, and I'm surprised. But so we'll talk about it in detail a little bit later as we go through it. But first, Bubba.
Yeah?
I thought this was just going to be just a one-off. We were just going to talk about the pilot episode. But the reason we're back is because of our double L's.
Double L's?
Yeah, you're being inattentive tonight.
Oh.
That's our loyal listeners. We got a huge swath, of which we can only read 2, of people who were begging us asking us.
We got more feedback, too, from which included spoilers that we don't want to talk about. But we want to shout out those people.
Let's shout out the people who are the reason we're here again tonight. And the first one is, and I'm going to butcher this name, so I apologize, Narcisse Joa?
Yeah. Wonderful double L. I love Narcisse. She's great.
She said, I would love to hear a weekly American Gods podcast. I listen to all the Double P podcasts.
Woo!
I proudly call myself a double L.
Double L?
Yeah, I just told you, loyal listener.
Oh, Narcisse, that's pretty clever. Good.
After listening to the first Joffrey of podcast episode.
All right.
Whoa, they're old school. I like it.
Heck yeah.
Even if I don't watch the shows, but this one I will definitely watch, so please do the podcast. The show isn't airing yet in the Netherlands, but luckily I can stream the episodes. I love that.
Ooh.
That is really cool. And not only that, but we got some comments on that as well, which was so surprising to me that I forgot to record the. I forgot to look at the comments.
Well, that's okay, Narcisse. Thank you so much. We once again, we can't make any promises that we can cover this weekly. If trouble comes up, we'll definitely do an end of this season review because this is a great show. Only 8 episodes. The reason why I'm a bit hesitant is that this upcoming summer here on the Double P Podcast Network.
Ooh, it's going to be a doozy.
It is going to be a doozy. Twin Peaks goes from May 21st all the way to September 3rd. Within that, we're going to do the 7 episodes of Game of Thrones Season 7. Plus, there's a good chance we'll be doing Game of Thrones, Twin Peaks, and The Strain, because The Strain tends to come back in late July, early August as well. So 3 Sunday night shows, and then Ash vs. Evil Dead, another great podcast entitled Ash vs. Evil Dead versus Bubba versus Catfish. That has been that sneaks up. Sometimes that sneaks up.
I feel like though they're going to stick around the Halloween release time. So let's hope.
We're hoping.
Let's hope. I think they did that as a kind of a promo for the first time to get people excited because they like to see those kind of shows. Now that's established, maybe they will move it around. Let's hope not. Now
but if we get too swamped, Narcisse, I apologize if we don't cover this every week, but as you can tell from these first 2 episodes, this is a fun show.
We're definitely going to watch
into it.
And so if we don't cover every episode, we'll definitely cover them either intermittently or we'll do a big end-of-season podcast about it.
Yeah.
So now another message we received was from Susan Smith, who says, boys, so thrilled you are covering American Gods.
Oh, thank you.
Like Catfish, I love all that is Neil Gaiman.
Whoa.
Side note, the audiobook of Anansi Boys, narrated by Lenny Henry, is amazing. Well, that's a side note for me. I hear that's amazing, too. I believe they have a lot of different people doing the voices, either for Anansi Boys or for American Gods. But I haven't listened to any audiobooks. I'm looking forward to the show and your take on it. If I can muster up the courage, I'll attempt comment. It's a story I've read many times and always understand more with each reread. Cheers, Double S.
Double S?
Yes, Sue Smith.
Oh, hey.
Now, both of these comments we got on our Facebook page.
Right.
Now, how do we reach that page?
Well, if you want to leave us a comment, if you want to encourage us to keep going with this podcast, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Double P Podcast. That's the word double, the single letter P, the word podcast, plural. Facebook.com/Double P Podcast. We want to hear from you. We're going to watch the show either way. This is great. This is fun. But we really do this to interact and hear from you guys, our loyal listeners. It's so cool when you guys are there. Like the Facebook page so you can hear about all the shows we do. So now let's dive in to the Secret of Spoons.
But before we do that, I'd like to make a plea to our listeners. I'm not sure if anybody – there must be some people watching American Gods who don't know anything about it. I assume there are. Those are the people that I'd really like to hear from. I'm glad that you're – in on the show, and you decided I'm not going to read the book to give us this point of view, because many times I'm watching it and I'm wondering, does this part make any sense to somebody who doesn't know? Is it intriguing, or is it just confusing / bewildering? So let's kind of talk about that a little bit, kind of as we go through it, kind of keep that as sort of our theme for tonight. The creators of this show have done so many cool shows, and they have just decided to make, I mean, basically it's art. It's kind of poetic. The music, the cinematography, it's all entrancing and I think special. So even if the story doesn't grab people or confuses people, I think they can just go along with how lovingly and carefully that it's done. So speaking of music and weird imagery, what we didn't talk about when we covered the first episode was the opening of the show, which to me is kind of interesting because they're showing a bunch of old gods, but they're playing sort of modern music. To me, weird music, weird images, and frantic music without lyrics just puts me in mind of my periods that I've gone to Burning Man. Now, the music is not exactly dubstep, but it does not have lyrics. So it's sort of a melding of the old gods and the new gods kind of feel.
The imagery is in some ways really cool, and I feel that the show open really sells the show. You're talking about old gods, but you also see things like a lot of pills. Are Americans nowadays addicted to pills? God, I take, got to lower your cholesterol, so I take a pill every day, right?
Right.
And so it is a fun melding. It's not an opening that I truly grab onto. Like, I remember so many people love talking about the Game of Thrones opening, or even an opening of a sitcom that's really fun, like Fresh Off the Boat, which is super short, but it gets you in that mood with that hit song. So I would say the opening is actually kind of pretty to look at, but actually one of the weakest things on the show, since everything else is so good.
I feel like stuff goes by so fast. It's either that or the combination of the music, which is very upbeat, that it's funny, and maybe this is intentional. Instead of drawing me in, it kind of unsettles me. So maybe that's the idea that they're going for. But it definitely get a kind of unsettling feel. And then we go into I looked it up. This is a 7-minute scene that we see the introduction of Anansi, who is a spider god. We see that these men are being brought over, obviously from Africa, by the Dutch. They're in chains, and one of them is pleading to the god, Anansi, to come and deliver them. And Orlando Jones gives, which is an amazing, having seen it now 3 times. There was a kind of a preview that they released online that was just his part of it.
Yeah,
but
that was a mini part of it. But last week at this special screening we went to, they showed the whole thing.
The whole opening.
And I really think you need to see the whole thing to truly get the power, to get just even the jokes, true, complete, open honesty now. When Orlando Jones comes down the stairs, one of the first things he says is kind of the wry, ironic comment, hey, we all need to learn to swim. I had a nervous chuckle, like, am I supposed to laugh at this last week during the screening? And the whole theater did. But it's those kind of light touches. And he has a couple of little, you almost want to call them laugh lines in this incredibly powerful speech that you just, I want to get up and burn the darn boat. Yeah, I mean, this is terrible what's happening to these people. He brings it. If you could give an Emmy, and they're right now soliciting for Emmy votes, for Emmy attention, just showing this entire scene to anybody, you're like, holy smokes, give it to Orlando Jones, give it to the show. That's how much I love the opening scene.
It's funny because before we actually watched the episode, I'd gotten some screeners, so I got to watch the first 5 episodes of The Handmaid's Tale, and what I was telling you bothered me about it was the lack of humor. Everything is so quiet and dour and gray, and I see that in a lot of, obviously I watch a lot of, futuristic / dystopia kinds of shows, and one of the things that sort of bothers me about it is even if it's beautifully done, it just feels so muted because everything is so muted. The world is quiet. Everything is gray, and it's just everything is depressing. And I think this opening shows how you can show a serious subject and you can talk about serious issues, but still have a little bit of humor. And that may sound horrific, but I do think that's something that The Handmaid's Tale needs, is a little bit of humor. Even if you have gallows humor, I feel like it's just it's oppressive. I think it's well done. I think it's amazing. But I just feel like, somebody slap me after I'm done.
Well, I haven't seen The Handmaid's Tale. I want to. It is getting great reviews, even with this obviously tough mood that it sets because of this world that they're putting these poor women through on that show. In this show, when Mr. Nancy is talking about that, for the next 100 years, it's terrible. For the 100 years after that, it's terrible. For the 100 years after that, it's still terrible. And I think we touched on this a bit last week, but Orlando Jones, who I remember first noticing him when he was like a music video VJ host on like FX. I think that when they launched the channel FX, I think it was, he was one of the first people, they were just showing music videos at times in the FX house. And he's a comedian, but boy, does he bring it.
And I think he was I remember reading, and I could be remembering wrong because we know I'm the god of inattention, but I remember reading that he was the one who came up with the idea for those 7-Up ads that he was ubiquitous in.
Right.
And so it's sort of his idea, and he ran with them. So yes, I do remember him as a comedian, but he's so powerful and lyrical here, and the to use kind of an actory word, the levels he shows. He's fascinating, and I think that's a great. I think that's just a great performance and a great scene. Now that's a long scene that works for me.
Yeah, I completely agree, Catfish, and because here we have this comedic actor knocking it out of the park. I think we got to get Carrot Top in something. All right, I'm kidding.
Now, I was going to say, because I'd forgotten, having watched it this a week ago, because I'm the god of inattention, and the joke that I had written down was, yes, Coming to America, Anansi, but I'm like, well, he didn't get there with these guys because they burned the damn boat down. But then at the end they show the plank made it to the shore.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the problem is, as I sort of, I talked about last week, and I don't know where you put it because I was recklessly spouting spoilers left and right, is that the idea is, and I don't think that's a horrific spoiler, the idea is people's belief keeps gods strong. Right. And that's why there's new gods have been created because of people's faith in the media, in technology, like that. That's how these gods are created. So
Could as the non-book reader, let me just say that one thing they mentioned at the panel last week is that it feels like every episode is going to introduce, yet here's another god.
Right.
Did this episode suffer in any way? And I'm thinking this as I'm saying it, so if it doesn't come out clear, I apologize. But did this episode suffer in any way because we have this powerful introduction to Anansi, to Mr. Nancy, to Orlando Jones' character. And then we don't see him again for the rest of the episode. And we don't have a direct tie, which I could tell, to all of the goings-on in what you would call the A-plot, the main plot of Shadowmoon and Mr. Wednesday cross-country road trip.
That it could be, although I would think that it's nice that you have the introduction. I mean, we're going to see somebody new every week. I will say this, that they mentioned in the panel, and I feel like it's going to be true, is that we are going to see Mr. Nancy far more in the show than he was in the book.
Well, after this scene, bring him on. Great.
Absolutely. So then we go back to our lead, Shadowmoon. Speaking of, now this kind of making my point now that I think about it. Shadowmoon is a guy who could do with a chuckle every now and then. He is just a dour mofo.
Now, Catfish, as the non-book reader, I believe these are the kind of points you want me to bring up.
Absolutely.
I have no idea how Shadowmoon was saved. He seemingly, as far as I could tell, something washes over the tree where he was being hung up, lynched. And next thing you know, he's getting his body stapled back together at a hospital.
There was blood splurting up. It doesn't seem like he's got rope burns. He does still say that he was strung up.
Yeah, that's a good point. He doesn't have rope burns on his neck.
This is one of those things, I think, even as a book reader, when you see it, you just, and I believe you alluded to it earlier, sometimes on this show, you're going to have to be okay with not really knowing what the heck's going on. I wish it could have been explained earlier. My note was he wasn't strung up. How was he saved? So those are my notes. I guess it's, if that's the kind of thing that bothers you, you're probably going to hate this show.
Well, let me say it washed over me. I did have that question in the moment.
Yeah.
But because there's the immediacy of, oh my God, he is really effed up. We got to staple him back together. Even when he goes to see Mr. Wednesday there at the America Motel, and he's got his shirt and jacket back on. It's covered in blood. So I kind of, the show moved so quickly, I really didn't think about it too much in the moment.
Well, another thing, and this comes down to the writing. I mean, we talked about the actor playing Shadowmoon in his performance last week. But again, this sort of comes down to writing where you're going to see that although he'll comment on things, he doesn't freak out about things as much as you or I would freak out about them. And this is one of them. He doesn't go and I would be like, what is going on here? This whole thing happened to me. I saw this weird stuff. What is going on? But he doesn't.
He doesn't. And then seemingly once Mr. Wednesday is like, okay, overtime, double pay, he's like, all right, cool.
Whatever. I'm good with that. He does. We get to see, Wednesday, he's always got a good con going because he is there with some lady and he says, well, Shadow says to him something like, kind of what's going on? And he says, well, if you ask the father of this young lady, if you ask the brother or the whatever, and then he says, but if you ask the young lady yourself, she might say I was expanding her horizon.
Oh, wow.
Wednesday, he's ready to reply to anybody.
This led into the first kind of visual, oh, wow moment for me in the show.
The young lady's breasts?
She's lovely. She was lovely. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
But I'm talking about Shadowmoon goes back to his bed. He's sitting in the bed, and then the camera does a 360, maybe not a full 360 move, maybe just a 180 move around him in the bed to reveal this, what we assume is a dream of his wife, Laura Moon, coming into him.
She says, funnily, he says, you're dead. And she says, that was just a dream. And then he wakes up from his dream.
Well, you know what? Get your story straight, Dream Laura Moon.
Well, and it's hard for me to ask you any questions about what you think is going on here because a lot of stuff was actually spoiled for you at the panel that we went to.
Well, obviously, even if stuff hadn't been talked about at the panel, in the premiere episode last week when Shadowmoon goes to her grave, and this to be honest feels like a horror trope, but he had that coin that he got from the tall leprechaun,
Matt Sweeney.
Exactly right, and he flips that on the dirt covering his wife's coffin, and then it suddenly sinks into the dirt. There is obviously, I've seen enough TV shows and movies to know there's obviously something going on there. But is she just a projection into his mind? Maybe he is just going insane, as he later questions at a diner. I wouldn't think so, but he sees her everywhere. And this gets to another moment that just had me saying, oh, this show is so fun. Shadowmoon goes to his house. He's standing outside the house. The house from the outside looks like a shot, a composition, something from Bryan Fuller's great short-lived show, Pushing Daisies. And then, as he's staring at the house, the paper boy comes by and throws a paper and hits him in the back. Like that's humor about Shadowmoon. He's not creating it, but how much worse can my life get? Smack. That was just a great moment. Of course, that leads to him going into the house, and he keeps seeing his dead wife. He keeps seeing Laura.
Here's another. This is worse. Something that happens in this segment is worse to me than not explaining something. Whereas something happens that's supposed to be mundane, but it's also unbelievable. First of all, he's got appropriate packing materials, including that very special. It's like a regular box is like 15 cents, but these boxes are like $1.50. The hanging shirt packing box.
Oh, man.
Okay? And when he walks out of the house, and somehow he had called a mover and moved all of his stuff out of the house in one day. Now, that was a little ridiculous to me.
That is hardcore. Of course, one box that he's afraid to go see is the box of his wife, Laura. And That leads to some equal opportunity nudity and a very disturbing image for Shadow. When you find out that your wife has been fooling around with your best friend, they're now both dead, and the rumor is that she was doing him, your best friend, orally when they died, and then to go through her phone. And as soon as he looked at her phone, I was like, oh, please have a passcode. Please have a passcode so Shadow can't see this. It led to what I considered another...
Worse, though, a phone with a cracked screen and blood on it. I mean, come on.
But it led to another funny joke. You're talking about how Shadow needs to have some humor. And so you're right now, Shadow himself isn't kind of cracking the black comedy you would think he would after he's, the gallows humor, as you said. But him looking at this erotic image that his best friend said his wife, and then he looks up and he sees it framed in the picture frame. That was funny.
Yeah.
Once again, it's a fun show that makes you that opens up so many possibilities. You're like, where is this ride going to take me next?
Yeah, it was so good. The image was so disturbing to him. Apparently, he decided to clean the bathroom.
Yeah, pretty hardcore. Pretty hardcore.
Now, when he gets outside, he meets with Wednesday. And unlike on the first episode, where Wednesday kept alluding to things and that Shadow didn't know, but not coming out and saying it, this time Wednesday comes straight out and says, there's a rumor about how your wife died. And finally, Shadow knows something before Wednesday does.
Aww. Well, I don't know why I'm even going to ask this, Catfish. Catfish, your world is devastated. Shadowmoon, I think the actor was actually a bit better in this episode, but your world's devastated.
Right.
Why do you keep working for Wednesday? Why not just say, screw it, I'm taking all the money I have, I'm going to the beach, and I'm just going to chill for a friggin' month, a year, whatever it takes to recuperate?
Well, I think particularly with this character, there is maybe some confusion about his motives, but to me it kind of seems like he was sort of a man. He's a serious man who believes in having a purpose, and it just doesn't feel like someone who's serious to just get away. Like it feels like he's the kind of person that needs a purpose to go on.
Okay, but Mr. Wednesday, Mr. Wednesday, when he's talking about Laura Moon and he's saying, I'm going to say this and you're going to want to knock my lights out and stuff. Why work for that person? I don't know. I'm not sure they've truly sold me on that part of it. Once again, it washes over me a bit like how did Shadowmoon survive the lynching? But on reflection, I wonder about it.
But think about this. He had his wife he was going back to. He had a job he was going back to. The wife is gone. The job is gone. His best friend is gone. He's an ex-con. So, I mean, and also someone who clearly has sort of a physical presence. So maybe he feels that there's some danger and sort of attracted to that. Clearly, if I work for someone and I got my butt kicked the way he did, and then they mentioned my employer, I would say to that employer later. But not Shadowmoon. And we see, what does he do in this episode? What does he care about his life? He shows that he doesn't care about his life. And so it's like, well, this person's kind of dragging me along. I'll go because it's just easier than pushing against the tide.
Now, one thing I'm trying to put the pieces together.
Okay.
When he gets in the car with Wednesday, Wednesday says, don't take the interstate. Is there possibly a god of transportation? Do we like getting out and moving so much that a new god like, hey, look at us burning down the highway, going on the Autobahn, is something new? Mr. Wednesday obviously doesn't like anything new. He hates cell phones. Ooh, that would be painful. And so maybe...
They're smart to get rid of those cell phones for sure.
And so this leads to another just visually beautiful shot where as the car pulls down that dirt road, it looks like the shadow of a raven crosses the top of the field and the top of the car. So beautiful, so incredible. And that leads us to a shopping scene and a diner scene. Which do you want to tackle first? Shadow in the shopping, or do you want to go into the diner with Mr. Wednesday?
I didn't even make notes on the diner, so the diner was first, wasn't it?
well, they walk in and he says, "Go buy me this stuff," or maybe I'm getting them confused. Maybe the shopping was first.
I think the diner is really only significant in that it introduces to a character that we're clearly going to see more of, because we wouldn't just see a little bit.
I asked what was going on with this man who Shadow was meeting. The man Wednesday was meeting. When he walks by Shadow, his eyes light up red, and it's like, trouble.
So yeah, he's another old god. Although my feeling is, unlike some of these other old gods, that this might be. He seemed a little bit more put together. I would think that this is a god who might be still worshipped a little bit more than these other gods.
That's a good call. So let's go to Costco. That does have to seem to be a crazy thing when you're in prison and then go to Costco, where like prison, so many things are kept from you. Costco, here's everything in the world that can be sold. And that leads to another 10 out of 10 scene for me. Gillian Anderson, Detective Scully.
Yeah.
On the TV as Lucille Ball. I love Lucy. I loved this scene. Holy smokes. She kind of looks like Lucy. This is really good.
She kind of did. She didn't really try to sound too much like her.
No.
So that's interesting. Again, if you looked at IMDb or you read anything about the show, you'd know what she's the god of. I guess it sort of becomes clear. She's not really the god of television, but sort of media, which incorporates television and everything. So that worked out well, and I did think that was a great scene. She's definitely. It's nice to see that the old gods seem kind of broken down in kind of the same way, but the new gods, because they're vibrant, seem to be vibrant in different ways to me. So I kind of think that that's cool.
I just thought it was wonderful. I love that, hey, you can unplug the HDMI cord and she's still going to talk to you, Shadow.
She is done.
I suppose.
She's a lot smoother. She's a lot smoother than Technical Boy.
Yeah, nice. Well, she didn't beat him up, right? She wants to recruit him. And so this really Detective Bubba, let me put on my hat here, Catfish. Mm-hmm. Detective Bubba certainly has to have me thinking, why in the world does anybody care about Shadowmoon? Why did Mr. Wednesday want him so bad? Why does now, for lack of a better word, Lucille Ball want him now? I'm not sure what god she is yet. Why is Shadow so important? Obviously, something about Shadowmoon, Moon Shadow, Moon Child. Is he the devil somehow, or the cursed one who brings death about him? I don't know. But that is what I am trying to figure out. Don't tweet at me and tell me spoilers, but if you are like me and you have no clue, go ahead and tweet at me at Fit and Trim on Twitter.
All right. Well, I think that, you know what, I think that is a great question, and I'm glad that you're intrigued, because clearly it does seem as if he's more than just some bum. He's a good-looking dude,
bum.
though.
Yeah, he's a good big man.
So this time he does, right, so that scene happens before the diner scene, because it's the diner scene where he says to Mr. Wednesday, I am seeing some crazy stuff. And again, Mr. Wednesday does not fill him in particularly. In fact,
doesn't fill him in, doesn't even kind of cheer him up in any way.
Right. He says basically, you're crazy, or the world is, you got it. When you decide, come back. Instead of, clearly, Mr. Wednesday has a plan. Right?
Right. We found out later in the episode that Mr. Wednesday said he's trying to bring him along slowly, it felt like.
Yeah. So, considering everything, I mean, if this guy had told, somebody who was working for me had said, I just got beat up and strung up, and then some TVs talked to me, I would say, I better clue this guy in before he runs away. But maybe Mr. Wednesday is more afraid that the stuff that Shadow doesn't know is more likely to scare him away than the random beatings that he's taking.
You know what? Okay. The TV talked to you. Hello. Welcome to Skype, Shadowmoon.
Right. And so then they go on the road, and that's when they toss the phones. And Wednesday indicates that charm can be learned. So there's still hope for me, Bubba. There's still hope.
Well, no. He said there was an age limit. He said you can't teach old gods new tricks.
I did not hear that at all. He said charm can be learned. That's the lesson I'm learning. And then we get what's amazing.
Here we go.
And I love it because then it goes up into the sky, and then we go into space, and all of a sudden we have the the man with the frozen rictus of a smile on his face, and there's something else that's frozen and hard. And I thought, what the hell is this? And then, of course, we see, then we come out to Bilquis, and you realize, oh my God, Bilquis contains multitudes.
Right. You know, there are so many crude jokes that I'm on the tip of my tongue.
There are so many. Well, the first thing I would say is, if it's really that big in there, why does she have to shrink the guys down? Oh, sorry. I don't want to be sexist.
Right. Don't be
Ladies,
sexist.
too.
I know. Bilquis, she's rolling, and she earns her keep on Starz After Dark. Hello.
Let me tell you something. I can't even imagine what her budget for candles is.
Now, all right, Catfish. Have you ever, told a young lady, said, hey, I'm going to take you around the world. I'm gonna open up your horizon. I mean, this is some advertising that if you saw it on Tinder, you wouldn't believe it. This is some real eye-opening. This is out of this world lovemaking. I mean, this is the real question that this episode poses. Yeah.
The most important question.
Let's hear it.
Okay, you saw that guy. You saw the guy frozen there for a second. Mm-hmm. You saw the look on his face. The question is, yes or no? Would you be happy with that?
Eternal happiness, eternal right.
I mean, it's the question, right? Would you rather die or just be eternally at that point?
Well, I don't know. There is also, I would say, a bit of horror in Bilquis's conquest. And so, it might be a good way to go, but I'm not sure I want to go like that.
I'm telling you, I think...
Maybe in my 90s, come get me.
I don't think that the answer to this question is cut and dried. I think different people could answer it different ways, and that, honestly, all personnel questions for people hiring jobs, this video should be shown and the question should be answered and then explained. I think this is all you need to know about a prospective hiree.
Okay, let's leave the cosmos and
let's do it. But first, let's talk about this. So then she goes into a museum, and
right, we do need to talk about this.
Sort of, she sees this beautiful jewelry laid out,
and the statue, which, as a newbie, I'm assuming is her, some representation of her,
right? And so, for a moment, she sort of, even though she's still standing there, I suppose she sort of impresses her body on the jewelry. So this is interesting. We already kind of knew this about Bilquis. We didn't learn too much more. I mean, we did learn the fascinating thing about what happens. If last week you were like, my God, what happened to them?
What happened to Bill Murray's brother?
Now you know he's floating out in space with a smile on his face.
Well, let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Would you want to double B and end up in the double C?
Double B?
Yeah, well, would you want
Bone Bilquis?
Right, and end up in the double C?
The cosmic C word?
Yeah. Exactly, you figured it out, Catfish. Do you want a double B and end up in the double C?
I think
everybody's unsubscribing now.
I think like you, I think it's something like I imagine retiring in Hawaii. I think this will be like 20 years after I retire in Hawaii. That'd be a good way to go. So it feels like we're sort of just keeping touch with Bilquis. I feel like the same thing is going to happen next week, is that we'll keep in touch with Bilquis again, or now that we've seen her twice, maybe we'll just get in touch with Mr. Nancy again to sort of remind us these people are in on this journey with us.
And once again, as the non-book reader, as the non-novel reader, that is the thing that would keep me going, even when I was disappointed with this cliffhanger, this end scene. I want to see these people get together. They are creating colorful characters that I want to see them all to get together.
A different kind of double C.
That's right.
The cosmic. I'm so proud of myself. Okay. All right. So now we get to Chicago.
We're sort of kind of town.
We're sort of briefly introduced to Czernobog, and then we get to meet the Zorya sisters. There's three of them. The main one that we get to know
is Cloris Leachman, man.
Cloris Leachman. Exactly. And by the way, Czernobog is played by Peter Stormare, who's also great.
Right. And so Cloris Leachman, her character is called Zarya? Was that correct?
No.
The Zarya sister.
Remember, that's their first name. So they're the Zorya sisters. And she is Vetchernaya. Well, that's horrible. The rest of them, the other two names are even worse to pronounce. And Czernobog. So as a obviously this is... What did you get the sense that, Mr. Wednesday says, I'm going to get my hammer, which is interesting. And I know at some point you said you were confused because Mr. Wednesday says it's his hammer, but Czernobog is the one who's been using it in his skillful.
If these are the same hammers, which you would assume, why does somebody have somebody else's hammer? Do you feel like they're there for the hammer, or because of there's obviously the wager about the checkers is if you win they'll come with you. It's sort of Mr. Wednesday is like it feels like he's trying to get the band back together. That is exactly what it feels like, Catfish. And so I would assume he wants these people. The hammer kind of is part of a package deal,
right?
What do I know?
None of them are really happy to see Wednesday.
That's true. The Cloris Leachman character, who I'm not going to try to pronounce that name, she seems civil to him. There's a sister.
Still not happy, right?
That's true. There's a sister we haven't met yet, though. That is also is one of those things that, based on a million other things I've seen, if somebody's behind a locked door or behind a door and they're like, "Hey, they're sleeping. Don't bother them. That goes back to the coin sinking into the grave last week, where I'm thinking, don't open that door.
I don't want to say that you're wrong. I just don't want you to hold out hope. And the reason is because I know what the Zorya sisters are, and so there's a very specific reason why one of them is not. They don't want to wake them. They're not. They're a nighttime person. Let's just say that.
All right.
So you get the idea that you do get the idea that since he's trying to get these people along, that there's some kind of
they're part of the band. They're part of the band. Let's get them back together.
Right. And so
and they're looking rough. I mentioned how in the premiere, Bilquis I thought looked kind of rough until she took Bill Murray's brother to the Double C, and so I wonder if all of these people, the two sisters we saw, plus I'm going to have trouble. Czernobog, how do you say it?
They call him Czernobog.
Oh, Czernobog, excuse me. Czernobog looks rough too. Nothing personal, Peters.
Well, he does tell an interesting story about he and his brother, he used to be the black one, but now he's older and he's gray. And I think...
Okay, all right.
Well,
let's puzzle this out.
Well,
he brings death. So he brought death, and he brought it with a hammer. Brought death with a hammer. Okay, so... And he had dark coloring, so I guess just once again, I don't know about gods. I don't know much mythology. Well, I call myself Episcopal. I don't know much about
This is interesting because these. Well, he is a god it's not very well known, but I think the point behind that story is there's a duality. He was he's sort of the black, the dark side of the coin, and his brother is sort of the light side of the coin. But I think the reason why they're gray now is the same reason why Bilquis doesn't look good. They're not strong anymore. They're not worshipped anymore. So they've lost their power, and so he can only be so bad unless he has the strength to be a god, good or bad. Then he's gray. He can't be as bad as he was. His brother can't be as good as he was. They just don't have the power anymore.
All right. Well, let me ask you a question as a newbie. So if we assume Mr. Wednesday is part of what you would call the old gods. Boy, this is Game of Thrones, old gods and the new. If he's part of the old gods and he's trying to get all the old gods together, I still don't see how they can compare to the new gods. How... In reality, I don't see a lot of people going and worshiping old gods. I don't see a lot of people going and I'm trying to think, the Jupiter or I don't see a lot of people worshiping Zeus. So how could you get an old god get worshipped again? I think that's an interesting question. That maybe that's what they're going for. Maybe just a bunch of gods together and you have enough strength to kind of knock your knock yourself into being worshipped, knock yourself into consciousness of a modern American audience. I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, that's sort of the interesting thing is that they can't, because they get the strength from people believing in them, there's really nothing they can do. You don't have the power to do things if people don't believe in you enough to give you the power. I mean, they don't want to go with them. At this point, I kind of feel it's almost like they're kind of boxed into a corner. For some reason, the new gods don't feel strong enough or confident enough, or just for whatever reason, they just don't decide, we'll just leave them alone. Right. Maybe they're afraid of them in some way.
Well, the new gods don't have maybe even any temples of worship. Like maybe we all worship technology, but we do it to spread out. And so maybe that's if you actually have kind of a holy site like a old god might, that might give you more power. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. I don't know.
Right, because pretty much media says now almost any screen you look at now has me on it. And I feel like she gets power from that.
Okay,
it's almost,
yeah. All right.
At this point, it would be interesting to see how it develops. It almost feels like the desperate, let's all get together for one last because we're going down anyway. Let's go down in style almost.
All right.
Maybe.
No, I could see it.
But I see what you're saying. It's like the way to come back is not the smartest idea is to take on these powerful new gods.
No.
But I guess if you've got nothing else, what are you going to do?
Right. Well, you got to beat your way into consciousness.
Now, Shadowmoon learns something interesting here because one of the Zoya sisters,
the one who seemed kind of smitten with him, call me crazy.
Crazy.
And I don't know. I thought the younger one was kind of checking him out.
She does a reading for him. It's not a good reading, but he does get some good news.
You're not getting. That's the best. That's the best news ever.
She lies to him.
You're not going to get cancer.
She lies to him so blatantly that he's like, that bad, huh? And she says, yeah, but your mother died of cancer, right? He said, yeah. Well, you're not going to die of cancer. Okay,
there
well,
you go.
good news.
That is the teacup is half full. That is the teacup is half full way of reading it. Good work, Cloris Leachman.
And then we have, as you said, the most menacing / eventually let's get on with it game of checkers ever.
Right. And so this is once again what I would call entertainment knowledge hovering over this entire scene for me. We know, or as a viewer, I'm meant to assume that Shadowmoon is quote-unquote our main character. He's the audience surrogate. He's learning about the world, and we're learning about it as he learns about it. He's introducing us to it. There's no way he's going to get killed. Now, he ends up losing the checker game, but even that didn't shock me too much, and it kind of felt like, get on with this. Why are we having this fake threat of, you're going to die, when you don't kill your main character at the beginning of the third episode? And so I didn't feel any stakes. I was like, get on with it.
Because strangely, and they must have thought of this at some point, strangely, it's the second episode in the row, and of course this is only the first 2 episodes, where they've put the lead character in a danger that we know he's going to escape from. So that does feel a little problematic to me.
And it goes back to the old television thought in that you got to get him back every week. So you leave him on a little juicy cliffhanger. But the last 2 weeks, I've been coming back because I love the world, because they're great performances, because it is a visual feast. I haven't been coming back because, oh no, is Shadowmoon going to die? That has been beside the point.
Right. Or clearly not going to happen. And you would hope that, well, obviously the explanation for this part is going to be, you may not believe it, but at least you'll get an explanation this time, because instead of just all of a sudden he's like, okay, I'm moving on.
Right. We're going to, the next episode, we'll be introduced to a new god for a 7-minute scene at the beginning. Then it just cuts to Shadowmoon getting his head stapled back together after the hammer takes him out.
So you do have a sense, even though you don't know that this is the details, that the sense is we're going to pick these people up and we're all going to go somewhere important. Not the most important place, but an important place.
Oh, that's a good point. I haven't figured out where that is. It nothing against Chicago. I love Chicago. I lived in Chicago for 4 years, but I assume that the end destination is not Chicago. It could be something like The Stand, where suddenly Boulder, Colorado, and Las Vegas are suddenly important. But I can't imagine. I don't know where they're going. Let's put it that way.
All right. Well, I know where they're going in the book, but honestly, it's not a huge deal.
Now, Catfish, I want to go to you without spoilers. We know that this is only 8 episodes.
Right.
And what we've kind of heard, or I've heard, is that it only covers the first 100 pages of the book, and then
I
spoiler alert,
a third. No,
well, okay. If it's 300-page book, then it covers a third. But then, as we mentioned to people last week, and we hope they don't consider this a spoiler, the season finale is based around a thing that isn't in the book. Do you, in the vaguest way possible, do you like where it's going? Do you have faith that where this is going is going to be a wonderful journey that we're on? Or is it we just got to enjoy the journey, not so much the destination? So what, in your opinion, what should we be looking forward to, the destination or the journey?
Well, I mean, if the journey is going to contain some of the scenes we've seen so far, like the 2 scenes we saw tonight that were amazing, I think you can just enjoy the journey. I don't know what else they're supposed to say, but the actors in the panel, even the ones who'd read the book or the ones who hadn't, thought that the season finale was great.
All right.
So, and we're going to be introduced to some more gods. They're going to probably interact more than they did.
I hope so. Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Eventually, we'll, I'm assuming that Bilquis and Mr. Nancy will join the crew that we have here. What's interesting is we have not seen what Mr. Nancy looks like now.
I hope he's still wearing that same suit. That was a sweet suit he was wearing on the boat.
It might be tattered, though, because I'll tell you, there were a bunch of people we saw who believed in him, but none of them made it out alive.
Well, he's just a little spider. He doesn't require much, maybe. I hope he keeps going. He seems like a cool guy.
Yeah, absolutely. But it'll be interesting to see the state he's in.
That's a good point, because wouldn't be worshipped much now either.
Exactly.
Poor Mr. Nancy, one of my favorite things. How about this, Catfish? I guess I'm terrible asking you questions where you can't fully answer because I don't want spoilers. Who's your favorite god? Have we seen your favorite god some already, or is there a god in the book who we haven't seen yet who you're so excited about? And once again, don't tell us who that is. Just because for me, a newbie, maybe it's just the power of that scene, but Mr. Nancy might be my favorite god so far of the ones we've met.
Well, he is great. And I love Mr. Nancy. And again, we didn't get enough of him in the book, and I feel like they are going to change that here. So Mr. Nancy is absolutely great. I love Mr. Nancy, but I think that, and again, this is kind of not from the book. They're expanding from the book. So we saw.
Yeah, but did you have a favorite god in the book? Did you have a favorite character in the book?
I think kind of my favorite character in the book, and he comes off a little bit different than I remember him, is Mad Sweeney.
Oh, okay. Well, he was fun last week. He was a lot of fun last week.
Yeah. And again, Mr. Wednesday, although he's enjoyable, he's kind of a con man, and so you don't completely trust him in the book.
He's good because you love Ian McShane. As a non-book reader, you love him because you love Ian McShane.
Yeah.
And he, that kind of sinful twinkle in his eye is so great. But so far, I need him to do more. I know he's driving the action and he's pushing Shadowmoon forward, but I just need more from him. I need him to have a great scene like I saw with Mr. Nancy.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, this is the thing that's difficult, is that, like you see with the sisters, the old gods are exhausted, and so they're not particularly magnetic.
All right. Okay.
So, as far as when I was reading the book, I was like, oh my God, I love this god the most. It was like, meh.
Well, wouldn't you say Bilquis, though, is an old god, you would assume?
Yeah.
And she's got it going on, baby doll.
Well, listen, she's got it going on, but she is visually, and the scenes they've written, like with her and Mr. Nancy, I mean, they're doing a fabulous job.
Yeah.
Doing a fabulous job. And I think as a reader, I couldn't be happier with the show.
I want to hear from all our double L's.
Double L's.
Loyal listeners.
Oh, right.
I want to hear from you guys. What are you excited about? Like Catfish. Catfish wants to hear from you guys who haven't read the books, who are newbies like me. I'm the other way. You can't spoil me. But book readers, tell me who your favorite god is. If we've met him so far, I want to know. If we haven't met him, tell me, hey, hold off, wait up. Maybe we'll meet him in a couple episodes or in season 2. Because this is just a fun ride.
Yeah. And this is not really a spoiler alert because it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. Is I am very much looking forward to the appearance of the actor Crispin Glover.
Oh, yeah. We saw a scene from him, a super short scene for various reasons last week, but he looks great. He looks intense. He looks like he's ready to kick David Letterman in the face again, all over again.
It's funny because we I won't spoil it, but we know the reason why we couldn't see the full scene is because he's in the scene, his big introductory scene has media in it, and we learned last week, surprisingly, that because she is portraying
Gillian Anderson
is portraying different media characters, they can't use any of her portrayals in any of the advertising or screeners.
Right. Well, say you are Desilu Productions, or whoever owns Desilu Productions and own the Lucille Ball show and the likeness of Lucille Ball. You go out on Hollywood Boulevard, there's still actually Lucy trinkets that are obviously being licensed and stuff. And so would you want your character, I Love Lucy, promoting some show that isn't part of Lucy, that isn't going to bring you revenue, and, let's be honest, isn't family-friendly, like I Love Lucy, one of the classic greatest sitcoms of all time, but very family-friendly and very much an image that maybe you don't want tied. You're allowing them to do it on the show, but you don't want tied to promotion, advertising for the show. So I can see that. I think it makes sense.
I see that it makes sense. Once it was explained to me, it made sense, but it still surprised me a little bit. I don't know why. So color me surprised. I got surprised.
And Lucy was in color for a bit, like those later Lucy episodes.
And then she went back.
Oh, good.
Back
That's the way she
to
should
black
be.
And white.
And I want to know from our young double L's, do you even know who Lucille Ball is? I want to hear it.
I think people know who
I
Lucille
hope so.
Ball is.
The Chocolate Factory scene is certainly one of the classics of all time.
You mean with Willy Wonka?
Yes. Do you mean my buddy Double W?
Double W with his CC.
Yes, okay, let's skip ahead. All right.
So, that was episode 2, A Spoonful of Sugar.
The Secret of Spoons.
Same. That's another double S, 3 double S's in a row.
Hey, did we ever figure out what your double C was, Catfish?
I made something up. It wasn't very good.
Okay. So,
chocolate candy.
I love that. Write to us on our Facebook page. Find us on Twitter. Once again, my name is Bubba. You can hit me up on Twitter at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIM at Fit and Trim on Twitter.
And I'm Catfish. And just as a reminder, the only reason we're doing this is because we did receive some requests on our Facebook page.
Heck yeah.
So let's just say this. If we don't get any, we won't do it next week. But if we do get some, maybe we'll do it next week.
Right.
So please write to us on the Facebook.com/double P podcasts. That's podcast plural. We've got a whole professional network that is getting acclaim left and right. And so, again, add me, friend me. I am Catfish. You can hit me up at CJGman67. The new god, the god of inattention.
If you don't hear from us next week, it's because we've done the double B to the double C. No, I'm kidding. Listeners.
Floating in space. Listeners. Frozen rictus on my face.
Listeners, would you do the double B to the double C? We want to know.
That's my Bilquis song. Floating in space with a frozen rictus on my face. A double B to the double C. And that's the end for me.
Double P podcast. Double P.
What I like to call.
We are rolling, and we're up in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Double P Podcast Network. My name's Bubba. You can find me on Twitter at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIM at Fit and Trim on Twitter. You know what? Let's start this over. In 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Double P Podcast Network. My name's Bubba, your god for blather on podcasts. And you can find me on Twitter at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIM.
Sure you don't want to do take 3?
All right, 3. Well, what god should I be? Like, that's how we should do it. I'm the god of blank, and you're the god of...
Yeah. You should be... you should be the god of specificity, and I'll be the god of inattention.
Okay. And we're up in 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2,